Hello and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. I feel like I should be introducing AJ and Graham right now, but I actually have two special guests for the podcast today. Excited to welcome to the podcast Davies Owens.
Hey, good to be here with you.
And Keith McCurdy.
Hey, good to be here.
How are y'all doing?
We're doing great.
Yeah, doing well.
So y'all are in town for the Paideia Conference. So that's a conference that Veritas Academy puts on. It's for the parents of the school. It's for teachers of the school. And y'all have given a number of talks over the last 2 days. I just pulled up a couple of these. The cultural moment, challenges and opportunities, living in the therapeutic age, engaging the heart at school and home, and some talks on technology as well. How's it been? How have y'all enjoyed the Paideia Conference so far?
We have loved being here. You know, we were just saying before we turned the mics on, being in a collaborative school environment is quite remarkable. I mean, walking around your campus, it is packed, moms and dads everywhere. There's such an enthusiasm for partnering with the school. I just love the collaborative spirit.
Yeah, and I love from my background, you know, I deal with families so much that are scared half to death sometimes to live somewhat counterculturally, and I love being at a conference like this where everyone is eager to live counterculturally.
Everyone's a redheaded stepchild, right?
Yeah, everybody. Well, no, redheaded ostrich.
Is that what it is? Okay,
yeah, redheaded ostrich in the neighborhood, and there's such an eagerness to say we really want to do this well. We're looking for that equipping.
That's great.
Yeah.
And have y'all been to Austin before, or is this y'all's first time here?
I have been here before, but we definitely had to make our food rounds.
That's what I was wondering.
Absolutely.
Did y'all have some time before the conference, or
we went straight from the airport to the best barbecue we could find?
To Salt Lake.
That's great.
Yeah, down in Driftwood.
Good choice.
Got our brisket, and then we got up this morning a little bit early and hit a taco truck to get our
taco truck.
You're getting the full.
We're not messing around if we're coming.
And I was here a couple years ago. I had Veritas doing some things. So
that's great. And I mean, probably the best part about the Austin airport is you still get Salt Lake that you can get at the airport.
At the airport.
Yeah, even at the airport. Yeah. So it's all that local food there. So that's very good. Well, good. Let's, we've kind of started talking about the conference a little bit, but curious to hear about y'all's background. Again, listeners have already heard your bio at the beginning of the episode, but just looking to hear about how you all came to classical education, your background in classical education. Davies, do you want to kick it off and talk a little about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely, I would say I'm kind of an educational mutt. I did not come through this through maybe typical doors, if there even are typical doors. I was just, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Jesus follower, kind of felt like, well, let me go spend my life hopefully improving the work of Christ in the world, and spent a number of years in local church ministry, and then I realized, gosh, we've got to connect with people on the go, and ended up doing a doctoral dissertation, worked in Silicon Valley, technology background, worked with a former Walt Disney Imagineer, and then had a young daughter who was trying to figure out school, and I thought, how do we educate the next generation? We have 16,000 hours, so it kind of awakened me to the way I went to school, which is an eclectic mix of public school and some private prep school, and I thought the world's changed. So ended up on the board of a classical Christian school, and ended up staying around so long that they made me the interim, and then I became the head, and then I realized, like, if we really want to change the world, that 16,000 hours is where it's at. So I've been 23rd year now in classical Christian ed administration, and now really working on the national stage. I think, as many have said, it's probably the last best hope we have right now for our civilization, other than Jesus.
Yeah, so. I want to definitely come back to that. So there really was, like, when you were looking for, it was education for your own daughter, that's what kind of prompted you to start looking into classical education.
Again, for brevity, I'm leaving out a few
I'm sure, right?
major pieces of that, but I mean, the kind of the defining moment, I would actually track back to when I was 18. My mother had gone through a agnostic period in the 70s and read Francis Schaeffer's book, and I ended up at L'Abri Fellowship and as a young teen, and ended up at 18 going back there. And I remember Susan Schaeffer, Macaulay Schaeffer's daughter, was raising her children, and I remember as sort of a pop culture oriented 18-year-old bumbling around, looking at these young children that were putting on Shakespeare plays for fun and were articulate and creative and imaginative. And I thought, I don't know what they're drinking over here in Switzerland, but those are different kids. She said it's a classical Charlotte Mason education. So I filed that away, and then when I had my daughter, I was like, we've got to go find one of these classical schools.
That's great.
So I'd seen the product before I even understood how it happened.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of your stories, I know, similar for AJ, Graham, and I, like, we don't come from this classical background, right? We're not like raised in this classical method, but we kind of come to it later in life.
Yeah.
But Keith, do you want to talk a little bit about that too?
It's in some ways a similar story. Being in the field of mental health for over 35 years, dealing with thousands of families, when we started looking at educating our children and paying attention to, what are the schools that are in our town?
Yeah.
schools that my wife and I grew up in, but realizing that is not where we want to educate our children because they've changed so vastly. And a new school had been around for a few years, and I started dealing with parents through what I do professionally from a classical school. And we visited and thought, yeah, this is really where we want to be because it lined up with two key things. It lined up both with what we believed was true in the sense of transcendent truth. It did not just present as neutral to our faith. It actually encouraged a common faith.
Yes.
And the second thing is the model of the Christian classical school matches and aligns with what healthy parenting looks like. We allow our children to struggle with good things, and we equip them to learn to struggle well. And so when we saw that in the educational process that we know was a part of really raising healthy kids, it was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And then, so our kids started going to a classical school. My daughter, I think, was in second or third grade. My son started in kindergarten, first grade. And it wasn't long, and my daughter and her friends talked the head of school into me being a basketball coach. I didn't know I was a basketball coach till they told me I was a basketball coach.
Surprise, right?
So I ended up coaching in a school for 11 years, having a kind of an interesting aspect of that, and then served on a board for 8 years. And so much like Davies, kind of once we got exposed to the world, it kind of enveloped us in many different ways. And my wife and I were very involved in many different ways in that school during the life of our children's education. And then have continued to stay in that world as well, just passionate about this way of educating our children and how it aligns with healthy parenting. And so that's led me to consulting. And along the way, he and I bumped into each other, and it's been a crazy ride after that.
And then I guess I'm curious to hear, does that kind of classical method or worldview, does that then, when you talk about this enveloping, does that relate also to your counseling as well? Like, do you see that were there changes to your practice, I guess, before being involved in kind of the classical world? Or?
I wouldn't say that. I think that involvement in the classical world also aligned with my practice. A very simple reality of, unfortunately, with psychology today, most people see psychology as holding truth when it doesn't. Scripture holds truth. Right. And so the sieve can't be psychology. The sieve has to be Scripture. Sure. And it's not buying into a lot of psychological thinking, the idea of how we feel is the most important part of who we are. That's really kind of rubbish. And transcendent truth is what we have to look at in how we guide people to live better. Sure. And so practicing in that way and having that focus, that's one of the things that when I was exposed to a classical education, it really stuck out. Because it aligned with what I teach people, how I coach people, how I work with people in living their lives. And so seeing an educational process that does that from the beginning is valuable.
When you talk about classical education lining up with these healthy parenting practices, is that in the same line of what you're talking about now? Or
Absolutely.
Is there more to say there of like what
well, a couple things stand out. It's funny, I speak on this a lot. It's the idea of two things that really jump out. Number one, classical education holds that there is transcendent objective truth. And many parents struggle today because we're looking at so many subjective opinions about the 48 different ways to parent your children versus getting back to, wait a minute, there is a transcendent objective truth about what is best for children and how we are to raise them. And seeking that, when we pursue that, it's amazing how the process becomes more simple. Doesn't mean it's not bumpy, but it's simple. And the second is the aspect of growth we see in Scripture. When you think about a passage in Scripture that relates to parenting, it's not the one most parents think of. It's the beginning of the book of James. Consider pure joy, I'll paraphrase, consider pure joy whenever we face trials. Develops perseverance. What's perseverance? The ability to stick with someone that's tough. Perseverance must finish its work so that we're complete or mature. And that's really that gives us both the goal and process of healthy parenting, which is the goal is maturity. Children who can live well when it's difficult. Children who can make the right decisions when it's uncomfortable. And the process is healthy struggle, helping them navigate. And so when you look at the classical world, it's the same thing. We say, we know, we accept there is a transcendent truth that speaks into all of this experience. And a lot of that is engaged in the shaping of the affections and identity formation that we touch on and deal with in the classical world. And we also know that rigor is important. And rigor, as best understood the way I look at it, is a process that life is going to be bumpy and hard, and we need to be willing to engage it. We don't make it hard on purpose, but we don't run away from it. And we want to equip these students to learn to struggle well. And so those blend beautifully, I think, with healthy parenting and the classical education.
For sure. It's a word that I think it's in your episodes on Basecamp Live, where building sturdy kids. Sturdiness is a concept that will come up over and over again. I just like that of like, there's a purpose to that rigor. There's a purpose to being pushed. You're resilient, right?
I ask parents all the time in a lot of conferences, I say, how many of you raise your hands if you would like to raise successful, happy children? And the whole room goes
Everyone,
up.
right? Yeah.
And then I say, now raise your hand if you would like to raise sturdy, capable children. And everybody looks around, and then they raise their hands again.
Doesn't sound as exciting, right?
I say, the reality is when you pursue the first, you don't get it. When you pursue the second, it's amazing what you get. And you get more peace and joy and hope and things in their lives. And it really calls those parents to understand that difference. What's the goal? Yeah. The goal's not a happy, well-paid individual. The goal is a good citizen. The goal is someone of good character.
That's great. Well, good. So that's very helpful. Appreciate that on the backgrounds. So I'm just looking to hear, y'all have mentioned this across both your answers. Our experience is tied to, one classical school in Austin, where AJ and Graham are teaching currently, where I worked at previously. So, we're kind of tied in for one community, but you all have this exposure across multiple schools, both that you've been involved with in terms of working with, as you all described, but also you speak regularly, you travel to these schools. I'm just curious to see what you all notice. Like, what are the things that, what are trends that you're noticing across classical schools? And, we'll move into kind of advice, things that will help broadly, but just what are things that you notice going from school to school? Davies, do you have anything?
I think it's, first of all, just the very fact that there are so many schools to go between. and I think,
which wasn't the case when you started,
which was not
right?
the case at all 20-some years ago. Yeah. And certainly COVID has, kind of lit the fire under so many, what I call salt and light parents that were well-intending that went, wow, that's what they're learning down the street. And, oh, wow, this is more than just reading, writing, arithmetic. It's actually forming the things that they love. So that notion of really shaping the affections. Yeah. So there's definitely been a rise, as I'm sure you've seen here, of parents just saying, we got to rethink this. We got to do it differently. Yeah. And so it is extremely encouraging as I look around the world, literally, that you see families that are banding together to little startup schools or homeschool co-ops or collaborative schools, 5-day. I mean, so all of the above in the classical space. It's very encouraging.
Yeah. And want to be involved. Like, it's not just to send the kids off. I hope maybe this will be a trend. But like, at least for Veritas, it's like these parents really want to be involved in the lives of their kids. Like they're sold on this method and then also sold on this collaborative approach where, at least for Veritas, it's like this part homeschool, part in school. Like, it's not,
Well, there's definitely a general trend in modern parenting, even in Christian modern parenting, to outsource. Yep. That's kind of a millennial way of thinking. Right. Drop off your car to get the oil change, your dry cleaning, and drop a kid off and pick them up. And but I think more and more we're realizing, if we don't own that those moments when our children's affections are being shaped and collaborate. That's one of the things we talked about this morning. Is this sort of the influence zones of the home and the school. Those two together, lock arms. It's a formidable influence.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think too, what's interesting to a change that you just mentioned. Is we are seeing schools now where parents are more intentional. My child is here for a reason. I'm not running from something. Right. I'm now running to something. Yep. And that's a change from 20 years ago. Yep. And we still see it today. I read accreditation reports from schools all the time. And still the number one reason parents want their child at a classical school is the faith aspect, or in essence, what they're saying is the safety aspect. Right. And we're seeing that begin to shift. It's like, actually, no, we want them to grow in this way. Right. We want to be intentional about choosing the form, the process of this education. And I think that's why also we're seeing parents buying into being more connected to it. They don't just see it as we're offloading this to somebody else or we're just putting them in a safe space. Yeah. It's we actually want this to be a growth prospect. And so it matters then, what is this growing? How is it growing them? And so they're leaning in a whole lot more, which I think is wonderful, but it creates challenges for the school.
Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple challenges that I see around the country, a couple questions that are constantly asked that were not asked 10 years ago as much. Number one, parents need a resource. Yeah. 10, 15 years ago, classical schools were like, well, we don't touch parenting. We're not, that's not our job. And my point has been, well, you have to be a resource. You have to cultivate resources for these parents because they ultimately are desiring a community. Right. When I deal with parents, they say, you want me to be back to the red-headed ostrich in the neighborhood. You're calling me to be that. And I say, yeah, I really am. That's how you live rightly. And they say, if I only had a community. Mm-hmm. And so what we're seeing now, the challenge to the classical world is, how can we be that community? Mm-hmm. How can we be that community that really helps cultivate things that are valuable to these parents beyond the classroom? Right. And that creates then another challenge in the mix. That's always been a challenge, but I think it's a richer challenge now. And I hear this constantly, is how do we shape culture in the school? Yep. And so those are things that I know Davies and I talk about all the time. What are the things that affect our culture in the school? How does that relate to culture in the family? And wow, maybe those are connected. And if we can help lead that with the community we build at that school, it's amazing how that helps parents as well.
Sure. Go for it.
It's another kind of angle on this is what I'm seeing trending quite a bit are individuals that are in the workforce that are looking at employees and saying, we can't find people to show up on time, to have a strong work ethic, and kind of noticing that these classical Christian kids are different. We're seeing colleges now creating honors programs just to attract class. So we've gone from, again, being a little bit of the odd one out to like, we want those. We want those. Yeah. And it's quite true. I think that it's, in some cases, I've seen parents who found a student out in the marketplace and said, well, how did that work? Then I want that for my children. I know a patent attorney in Boise, where I'm living, that says I will only hire classical Christian students because they actually get the job done.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is that thing that's different, or what is it that sets them apart? Just from people you've talked with, your experience, like, what is that attribute or set of attributes?
Keith and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, it's like the bar continues to get to be so low. It's like, wow, you
Anything.
They're not wearing pajamas,
and you're not wearing a sleeping bag and hopping into my classroom. Like, how wow.
Yeah.
I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, it's just this things that would have just been common sense 50 years ago. I mean, look someone else in the eye, know how to introduce yourself. Right. We were at dinner last night with many of the board members here at Veritas, and I was just talking about, as we kind of, those of us who now are in the empty nesting stage, that can truly look back and say, I see the fruit in my own children. I see their ability to go out and, be able to meet with the head of a financial organization and be able to advocate for yourself and to present yourself well. I mean, these are things that everyone should be able to do, but classical Christian students absolutely can do well.
Yeah, we see in these students when they get to college or beyond college or into the career field, into the workforce, we see an eagerness to engage the world because they're better equipped. They've built a sense of confidence. They often have good humility as well. We don't know everything, but we're eager to learn. We think we can figure things out. We know how to engage people. We know we're told to engage people. I mean, it's just, we have equipped them to be connected members of society. And so that stands out more than it ever has in society.
Well, and in truth,
go ahead.
I mean, what you guys talk about so well on your podcast is obviously looking at these historical works and the cultural and the historical impact. I mean, obviously, we sit here as the product of a Western Judeo-Christian heritage that instilled deeply a curiosity, a wonder, a sense of the world is worth knowing. We're not Buddhists escaping into the cosmic drop of ocean of life. I mean, we are, and that's where universities and hospitals. I mean, we've always been in a place of innovating and creating and discovering, which is what we're now seeing come out of this education back into the workforce.
Yeah, and when I go back to the wording, you mentioned I use the wording sturdy kids, raising sturdy kids. Yeah. I have parents often ask me, what's a sturdy kid? And I say, well, a sturdy kid is someone who is not afraid to struggle. And so our job is not to remove all their struggle, which societally that's what we do. Our job is to help them to learn to struggle well. And that requires, so much, faith foundation, learning the tools, learning the practical application, healthy identity formation. And when we do that, we have individuals at the next stage that are ready to engage, invent, think deeply about things. I mean, it's just, we're setting them on fire, and they're blazing. So
that's just when I was trying to find a time for this interview and was looking through the Paideia conference schedule. There's one that's for alumni. Has that happened already? Do y'all know? Graham and AJ are sitting in the room. It might be today, but I think it's for alumni.
Yes, after lunch, AJ's doing it.
Is that AJ's leading that discussion? So it's for alumni who are coming back. I think isn't the question, was classical education worth it?
Yeah, that's the last question.
That's the last question.
They don't answer it.
AJ says hopefully they give the right answer. But yeah, like that you have students who want to come back and talk about their experience positively. Like if my high school called me up, I probably would not be on that panel, right? Like, I don't know. So just that there is that like gratitude for what is received. I think that just lines up exactly with what you all are talking about.
And I would say not only gratitude, but so often I see alumni that go off and, we were just talking about this earlier. I mean, it's messy business. Yes. I mean, we don't judge these graduates as they walk off. Give them some time to go kind of own their faith. But in that messiness and in that self-discovery of what does it mean? Am I going to really follow Jesus? Am I really going to believe all this? There's an awareness like, wow, I had it pretty good back there. And a lot of our alumni will come back at Christmas and just immediately walk in and like, oh my goodness. I remember one alumni, and I've heard this from my own kids, like, I can't wait to go talk to that 12th grade teacher because they were actually articulate and thoughtful, and it wasn't just superficiality that I'm so used to maybe at my
Yeah, I mean, I think of my daughter. My daughter will be the first to tell you, "Oh my gosh, the things I hated in school.
Right, yeah.
I hated the uniform. I hated this." But she will say, it really equipped me to live in the real world.
Good.
It equipped me to navigate the real world, and she's speaking on every front.
Yeah.
And I think to me, that's so much more of a portrait of a graduate, someone who's equipped to struggle well, than this perfect picture.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're all going to get out and struggle.
Yeah.
Because we've equipped them now, but now they have to go out and find that and own it for real.
Sure. I forget I'm not going to get the language right, but the portrait of a graduate for Veritas is called the Veritas Valiant, and there's a poem. Y'all still use that poem, right? That describes each of those attributes. And one of them is, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's like when they make mistakes, they make things right. And so it's not just like, it's not only the good man or woman speaking well, it is also like the person who errs and then fesses up and then makes it right.
C.S. Lewis, surely what a man does when he's taken off his guard is the best indicator of what sort of man he is. It's not about what happens to you, it's what do you choose to do with it.
Exactly.
And we equip students to be able to respond to that well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I guess just kind of in line with this then, and maybe this will tie in, Keith, with what you were talking about on resourcing. So there are more demands on classical schools now than there were 20 years ago. It's not only education. So you both have the material that you're teaching, be that the old books, history, each of the subjects. You have this faith component that's very important. But there's even more than that. There's kind of like parenting methodology. There's more even than just what's in the curriculum. So I was hoping to talk a little bit. Y'all have just started this new venture called Zipcast that is hoping to address some of these issues related to resourcing. So I was just hoping to hear a little bit about that. Davies, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, my concern is I look broadly at our movement. I mean, as you just well articulated, there's a lot we do really well. We stand and this isn't the latest and greatest trend. This is a historical movement that has shaped generations forever. At the same time, we have to go live out in the context that God has put us into. I've done a lot of short-term mission work, and it's always amazing to me if you're going to go off to Rwanda, where I've spent time, the team will spend a lot of time thinking about the cultural setting in which we're going to go help this classical Christian school. But then we come back domestically, and it's like, I'm a Gen Xer, I always think, it's not the 80s anymore. And the problem is that students and the parents are showing up or living in a different cultural moment. Yep. And we talk a lot about technology because that's changed the landscape of the modern home. So part of what I believe is so urgently needed are two things. One is, as Keith mentioned, the old three-legged stool of there's the church and the home and the school, and we were always sort of afraid to cross over into each other's jurisdictions. I think we have to rethink that right now, and I think we have to recognize that there's a lot of content that a lot of young families need about Parenting 101 that just isn't. There's a Pew study out that said only 30% of families live within a 100-mile geographical distance of their extended family. So generational wisdom is not happening. There is no James Dobson. That might be Keith here in the making. I believe that's happening. But in all seriousness, as I've traveled around the country, young families, they don't know how to parent. Yep. And so how are we going to reach those goals of the graduate if they don't understand basic parenting? And then secondly, the constant question is, well, what is classical Christian? Yep. And they picked the school because the uniforms are cute and it wasn't scary like the school down the street. And we got to really go deeper. The problem that gets to Zipcast and what we're working on is a delivery problem, which is the reality is most schools use what I call 1998 delivery systems. Yep. I think we've moved from mimeographs and cassette tapes to probably email MailChimps and stuff with about a 15% open rate. And so the problem is it's not to be critical of the parent. We're living in a different moment where people want things short form, personalized, on the go. And so podcasting, which you guys know well, is a wonderful delivery system. I have families that will say to me every time I hear your voice, I think I cut grass. And I'm like, why? Because I'm always cutting the grass when I listen to the podcast. I'm like, that's exactly why we do the podcast, because you don't have to get childcare, drive down the building, and do the deal.
Right.
So Zipcast was born out of an idea a couple of years ago, which is using podcasting, but let's shrink that thing down to about 10 minutes. Let's deliver it on Monday morning, right when you're getting in the minivan, you're thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen this week? Let's give you your news and announcements in about 2 minutes. Let's kind of sweeten up the pot a little bit since the kids are in the back seat. We'll throw a joke of the day with a grammar schooler in there.
Good.
And then we'll use these kind of 90-second, almost like little movie trailers to just take a topic. Like, let's hit 90 seconds parenting tip. Keith's on all the time, just here's something that you got to think about as a in your marriage or in your family. Or let's take a classical topic and unpack a crazy word we use, like what's the trivium or paideia, or we even talked with you guys about the great books. I mean, what are the things that, and then we end with scripture, all that in 10 minutes. It's working really well because we build those 4 schools. They give us some news announcements, we cobble it together, send it back out to their parents, branded as their school on a Monday morning. And I think it's just that kind of I'm excited because I feel like, can we use the modern Roman roads, the modern delivery systems to help come alongside parents with the content they need, encouraging them on the go with what they need to know. And that's a lot of
and
what
how that
this is about.
harmonizes with so much that I approach with families and parents. It's interesting. Well, I'll give you real-time information. So the school that my children went to, I also have nieces that have their children in that school.
Yep.
So our school started Zipcast last week, or this week, I guess.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's this week. Traveling.
happened,
I don't know
yeah.
where I am in the country.
Yeah.
And I was flying here on Monday, and I got a phone call or a text from my niece, and I called her back. She goes, "Oh my gosh, I heard you. That is awesome." And I said,
great.
I'm like, "Was it good?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, what'd you think?" And she said, "It was simple, it was useful, and it was consumable."
Good.
And I told Davies, and we're like, "Yeah, that's exactly
it?
what it is." Because when I deal with parents, when I deal with families, and this is the model that Davies and I have talked about forever, it's one I've operated on for years, it has to be, you have to identify the problem correctly,
Yeah.
understand the principle that rules the problem,
Yep.
and then give a practical application.
Yeah.
And so that simple understanding, when I deal with parents, if I tell them 28 things, I confuse them.
Sure.
If we focus on one key thing, what's the principle that applies?
That's good.
And how do you apply it well? And so it really lends itself well so much to exactly the format that Davies created, which is let's use what's there as a tool, as a resource, in a way that's so consumable and practical. And so it's blended what we've really been attempting to do anyway through podcasts, realizing do it shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And
I think it's hard for us to come to terms with, I say this all the time back to the audience. It's the parents who walk in our doors are typically different, younger than many of us that run the schools.
Right.
And I think we have to kind of rethink. And I think I had a faculty member of a different school say to me about Zipcast. Zipcast makes me sad. I thought, oh dear, why is that? And I thought, that's not good. I said, that's the first negative thing I've heard.
Yeah.
Why is that? And she said, well, it's really Zipcast. It said it's confirming what I've been fearing all along, that people's attention spans really are shorter than goldfish. And that so often we're stuck in this state of like, well, we want our parents to read these great books, and we have book clubs, but only 3 parents show up. And like, so the intention is not to,
we're not giving up on the one.
We're using, that's like saying, well, movie trailers are killing all the big movies. It's like, no, let's meet you where you are and invite you into deeper connection and embodied experiences. So Zipcast actually, as we're kind of developing the next version of it, it's going to be able to add, you can click it while you're listening and add a longer version of that particular topic to go deeper into that if you want to. So it's not meant to just cater to the superficial. It's meant to say, but let's acknowledge that we need to meet people where they are and then invite them into a deeper understanding and training.
Right. And with technology, one of the things we wrestle with is, I speak on technology all the time. Davies and I, we've done a couple different podcasts on technology, one recently, baselining. And I would say in my profession, or even culturally, I take some of the hardest lines on technology, but I'm not anti-technology. It really falls into 3 categories. If technology is a tool for something useful that we deem good and valuable, it can be a wonderful thing. I mean, the wheel in the airplane is technology. I would not be here if it wasn't for them. I was not going to walk here from Virginia.
Right. Very thankful for that.
And so technology, when we keep it in the realm of healthy use, it can be good. When it slides into primary entertainment and filler of boredom is when it's the most addictive and dysfunctional. And so the idea is technology in and of itself may not be automatically bad. It's how we use it, what we use it for. And so what we've wrestled with is, are we, we don't want to steer people to more technology use that's unnecessary, but we want to use this well in an appropriate way as a healthy tool.
Sure.
And we've seen that with, Basecamp Live now in its 8th year, which is
awesome.
longer, 45-minute podcast. But, and when we started, I actually had somebody come up to me and said, podcasting, now is that a gardening thing? Like throwing seeds out? I'm like, wow, we are early in this experience. But again, it's meant to encourage people on the go. So, Minivan Mary, Soccer Dad Sam are kind of, and the idea is if we're going to raise a generation of what feels like the top of Mount Everest along the way, we need to stop in these base camps and encourage each other, be a part of a community that you were talking about. I mean, it does take a village. It takes a community of people. Chap Clark in his book Sticky Faith talks about the students that go the distance are because not only mom and dad are on board and the church is dialed in, but you need 4 or 5 others that are part of that collective community, which is part of what you guys are doing here at Veritas. It's part of your students. You're reinforcing that vision.
Multiple voices of the same community holding up the same things.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all crazy together.
Right. We're all crazy together.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate with Zipcast that it's a more communal experience that, podcasts listening to podcasts can be isolating, right? It can be just me with
Yeah.
my headphones, but it is designed for it's
It's
the drive to the
Somebody
to school,
said,
right?
yeah, somebody says it's kind of like you bringing back the 1940s,
Yeah,
fireside radio.
Yeah.
And one of the great stories, Keith.
I'll tell it.
We can tell us.
So I'm in Seattle. I'm in
this is a great
Seattle
story.
last
This
year.
is during our pilot when we were launching this thing. Yeah.
And Davies did a pilot.
Yeah.
I didn't know when it was dropping. So I'm in Seattle to school, and I come in the morning, and they got all the grammar school kids running around, and I'm just sitting in the back of a chapel area waiting for the older students to come in. And the head of school's talking to me and introduces me to another parent right there. And these 3 little girls whip around, and they're like, "Are you Mr. McCurdy?" And I'm like, yeah. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we heard you on the radio. And do you know, we made sure our parents went out on a date. We told them they had to because Mr. McCurdy's, I mean, I was like,
Yeah.
I had to call him. I'm like,
that's
I am
incredible.
a celebrity now to 3 little 3rd grade girls
Listening in the back of the minivan.
Exactly.
back in the minivan,
Right,
but they heard
Yeah.
parents need to spend time together
Yeah.
for the benefit of their marriage.
Right.
And they were letting me know we're on it.
Yeah.
So it's a community.
It is, yeah.
And it just totally shocked me. I called him and he's like, "That's awesome."
That is incredible. And that you have the entire school listening to that together too. Then
Yeah.
like you have parents who are to each other being like, you all should be going on your date night as well, right? Like
Correct.
everyone is
It
listening.
builds
to
that
It's-
in the
it's kind of
community.
your- I mean, it's kind of the Swiss Army knife for the survival kit for the week because it's, you need to know the news and announcements. Maybe you didn't open your email.
Yeah.
It's practical. And then you get these wonderful kind of parenting hacks and classical 101s and even a little scripture tucked in at the end with some questions to ask. So it really is
And a kid joke.
As a
And a kid
parts,
joke.
right?
Come
Most
on.
important part.
We have
yeah.
a hidden word of the week in there. I mean, so it
okay.
should be, multiple reasons to make this work.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm trying to remember, is Davies listening to your interview on Basecamp Live, you talked about like the schools being able to record a section and that being included.
Yeah.
Is that
oh, yeah,
in
absolutely.
the current version?
Yeah,
or is
current
that,
1.0, and we launched a little over 60 days ago. We have over 50 schools. We're going to now waitlist. Part of it is because it was designed to be easy. Schools literally send us in a 2.5 minute script of whatever news and announcements or updates they want. We have professional voice sound that reads it.
Great.
We have audio engineers that stitch that together. You get to preview it on a Friday and it drops to parents on a Monday. So if it takes 10 minutes in the week for the school, it shouldn't take more than that.
Right.
But it's branded as their school. It's their news and announcements, and yet it's really what the AP News Syndicate. I want to think I'm a genius. I'm really not. It's really just for
that.
most of the world today. Your local newspaper pulls from a national syndicate of great. So that's one of the things. Back to your earlier questions that I see is that we're not a franchise. But we need to act a little bit more like that because every school's asking, why do we do fill in the blank Latin or what? So let's answer that in an excellent way at a national level and bring that down.
Because you get common questions and then also excellent resources that just need to be curated and delivered to the schools.
And
right?
back to parenting again, this is the thing. To your point, I mean, we've had in our jurisdiction struggle. It's like, well, we as schools are now not only educating the children, we got to walk next to parents, and that's part of this. That's hard to do when your plate it's already full. So let us help you.
And
with
we
that.
shouldn't be afraid of just saying, "Hey, we're going to cultivate resources." And
Help you
Zipcast
just-
is another tool that says, "Hey, we can help you cultivate those resources and supply them in a way that's personal to your school."
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're getting close on time right now, so I want to make sure that I mention we've referenced it a few times, but Davies, I want to recommend your podcast, Basecamp Live. Big fan of the podcast, and also Keith, you can be found on that. You have some episodes as well.
I do, a bunch.
in there as well. So
He's really getting close to co-host. I don't know when you cross over that
I was going
line.
to ask. It's not official, though,
But
right?
I don't know. I'm still keeping my eye on him, but I'm pretty close to.
Well, when I went to
making-
Keith's website and clicked on podcast, it redirected to Basecamp
there's a
Live,
lot
and I
of
was like,
that going
whoa,
on.
whoa, what's happening
It's like a
here?
majority of them are Basecamp.
Keith's pretty common on there, and in fact, the one that's currently just dropped
Yeah.
yesterday, it happens to be.
That was the one
Is
we
that-
did.
Yeah, with
Oh, nice.
AJ
and Graham
Thomas.
are on that
Oh,
one.
that one. There you
Graham
go.
are on that.
You know,
Good.
did y'all talk about? Did y'all talk about Paradise Lost and the Odyssey, or what did y'all talk about? Great books.
Plato and
Plato,
Blacked Out.
Plato, and AJ blacked out. Cool, awesome. Sounds great.
So you did talk about the Odyssey.
That's exactly.
I
right.
asked him about it because this is I love what you guys do because there's I call it the gap of we have this sort of interesting philosophical, theological, literary conversation, but link that up for me with this
connect it. Yeah.
TikTok world that people are living
Yeah.
in. And you guys did such a great job. So definitely go listen to that.
Oh, I live on TikTok.
AJ lives on
you do.
TikTok.
I've seen you there.
I'm not gonna,
Oh no,
We really don't want you on TikTok.
stay away.
I don't think anybody wants me on TikTok.
No, nor anybody to be on TikTok.
Go listen to their technology talk. Yeah, seriously. And then I want to make sure also, Keith, your website, livesturdy.com, can check out resources from you. Again, can be redirected to your Basecamp Live episodes from there.
A lot of them.
Also, just all your resources there. Anything else to make sure we talk about at the end?
Yeah,
Any final words? Yeah.
Well, I think part of the reason we are here
Yeah.
is we have partnered together because we want to be a resource even personally. We consult with a lot of schools, come visit a lot of schools, speak to a lot of schools, and I think that that's another resource that schools are still learning about, that there are folks out there that are saying, hey, we'll come to your school and help you with this.
Absolutely. So very thankful for you all coming out to Austin to be at Veritas for the Paideia Conference. Very thankful to have you all on the podcast. But Davies, Keith, thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you
Thanks
for all
for
you guys
having
do.
us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And bye, listeners. Bye.